So I think we're live. Excellent. Awesome. Welcome, everyone, to session 4 today on Carleton's Data Day 8.0. So this session, we're going to talk about careers in data science, in artificial intelligence and machine learning. We have a very distinguished panel of professional data scientists here to talk about their experiences and their journey in data science. And I'm really excited to have this conversation with this group. So to start off, I thought we could do a little round of introductions, and each speaker on the call introduce themselves, talk about their current position, and give a kind of a brief summary of your career journey. Like, where did you start? How did your career develop? And I know that some of us, we didn't start out as being data scientists potentially, but we grew into it, right? And I think that's a really interesting journey for the students to hear about and those who are attending the session. So I'm not going to go first. I'm going to ask Navina if you will go first and introduce yourself.
Hello all, thank you for joining us. My name is Nevena. I'm a senior data science manager at Shopify. And I definitely did not start as a data scientist. I did my PhD in combinatorial design theory from University of Toronto, which meant that I was doing pure math, dabbling into graph theory, working on some NP-hard problems, algorithms. Did 3 postdocs, went all the way to Australia, had a blast there, but realized that I miss my family too much. And I came back to Ottawa, Ontario, where my family is. And you may know we have some great graph theory group professors here in the area, but I could not see continuing with my academic career here. So I was already working on some hard algorithms and problems. And I'm like, okay, what else is there? So I did a boot camp for data scientists with graduate degrees. And it was a blast. I got to do a churn model for a hair salon in New York that didn't even have data. They had a few spreadsheets that they shared with me and said, tell us who's not coming back to visit our salon. And yes, I've built them a churn model, but I mostly told them that they don't have data. It used 5 different timestamps in different spreadsheets. It was impossible to work with or actually say who is leaving their salon. So we mostly worked on data architecture at that point. So I started interviewing for jobs. I still cannot believe that I got hired, like seriously. Having 1 project under my belt. But Shopify was hiring at that point. Shopify was way smaller back then, 2016. And they wanted for somebody to build not a churn model, but a sales model. So how much a merchant will earn on our platform. And they're like, okay, come join us. And I did. So that's how I started as an entry-level data scientist. I did a few big projects there. Then they asked me to mentor a few people. Then they asked me to manage a team to deploy a near real-time machine learning model for credit card fraud detection. Then they were like, oh, how about, 1 team is not good enough for you. You managed to lead one and then train this other person to be a manager of another team. So that's how I slowly transitioned from hands-on data science to more of a leadership strategic role where I'm building teams. Right now I'm leading a money group, which is 6-7 teams, all in financial area for Shopify. That's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Navina. I'm learning new things today as well about your background. So moving on, Vin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, and thank you for sharing that story. I wouldn't say mine is similar, but I'd call myself an accidental data analytics professional. I studied in the Bachelor of Science, and just coming out of school, I was to be honest, very lost where I wanted to go in my career. And during that time, H1N1 was the pandemic du jour, and I was supporting as an IT support in Ottawa Public Health. And there it was mostly consolidating information from different data systems, as rudimentary as an Excel sheet to track, bookings, equipments, even to lunch. We had provincial databases that was tracking immunization records. There was an attempt to track even client demographic records at the time. And from that experience, I felt because in Ottawa Public Health and in public health in general, we have what we call epidemiologists, who are biostatisticians, often kind of health analysts, and that has definitely matured since then, wasn't really a role. So I felt I got typecasted as an IT guy. So like I purposely branched out into various areas of health promotion, health protection, worked a lot in program evaluation, program design, and even did behavioral social marketing. Because the city is such a diverse employer, I had a chance to work planning consultation also. Think of your Parks and Rec, planning application type of consultations and setting up even data systems and, evaluations for them, road safety promotion projects. And now I'm currently with the Community and Social Services Department. And what drew me there was essentially one project. And the project was the GM wants to have a better understanding of our performance metrics within social services, build me a dynamic dashboard. And spoiler alert, I still have not completed that task 5 years later. Very similar to Navina is we had to set up a data architecture from scratch. We are a creature of the province in the sense that we administer a lot of our social programs through the province. We don't really have data sovereignty over many of our programs. There's a lot of efforts to extract a lot of those from front-end applications, and there's a lot of limitations to that. And I call it, when I explain it to a lot of social services professionals, that we're building our library in-house. And so getting a secure file transfer from the province, for me, it's like a year endeavor of going back channeling, the navigating the province, or whether it's the federal government. And we're actually slowly building our library. We're slowly building classifications. We do a lot of metadata analysis. We also, are now getting to a point that we're trying to treat data quality and it's funny, I'm actually looking at working with a churn model too in our child subsidy program, and really looking at, what are the features we can train on, whether it's age, whether it's, care codes, whether it's location, that is explaining, and how we can predict how children are exiting or entering our system. And through that project, we realize, and we start asking the business, hey, why is this particular child older than what we expected? Oh, there's just a special needs program. Okay, great, we can account for that. Why do we have overlapping dates for these particular care codes? Well, administratively, when a child graduates from preschool to kindergarten, we want to hold that spot actually for that provider. So we're able to hold it for a couple of days. And that's a business rule that's being applied. Hey, it's not being applied consistently. During COVID, they actually did that over an extended period of time. How do we account for that? So a lot of data science is actually really understanding the business and understanding how that data is then expressed into our databases and how we can account for that. So I feel that we're getting there. I wouldn't say that we're at a full-fledged data science practice yet, but it's really setting up a lot of the infrastructure. And I've kind of gone up the ranks in the sense that I was a senior data consultant with the City of Ottawa, and then now I'm actually managing the small team. And I really feel at the City of Ottawa, social services is one of the few areas in which we have a fully dedicated small team looking at analytics to inform social programming and social policy. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Finn. So Beth, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Yeah, I don't know if you intended this, but I'm a great fit in between. So I started my life as a classicist. I was a linguist and went and did archaeology in Italy and learned a lot. And then came back to the States and did my degrees in anthropology. And so I am a social scientist. And then I very quickly sold out because I needed to pay for college because it doesn't pay very well. But I came to IBM off and on, and I had a great understanding of information architecture and information systems. So in 2012, when the Harvard Business Review said that data science would become the sexiest job of the 21st century, it was me, the social scientist and pleaser, who had the information architect, kind of profession behind me, a statistician and a mathematician. And the statistician and the mathematician didn't want to become an architect. They wanted to be a data scientist. So we got to invent the data science profession that's accredited outside of IBM. So if you get your data science profession, you get to take it with you. But that journey truly gave me a lot of understanding of, how disparate, the entire breadth and depth of what data science could be. And I define it as using data in the scientific method in order to solve business problems. And, we reinvented or remixed many, many different methodologies in order to be able to give people a framework. Because like you guys all found, data scientists would be like, well, I'll run the models, but could you deliver all the well-ordered labeled data sets with a bow for me here? Let me know when you're done. So I loved all aspects of data. I think that it's absolutely fascinating. I see data as an artifact of human behavior. My current role is I'm in consulting, and I add, the proverbial icing on the cake to a lot of our talent and transformation systems. And part of what I really wanted and got to kind of live the dream and reconnecting a lot of my anthropological roots is understanding cognitive science. And my specific interest is ontological NLP, and I'm very in love with graphs and ontologies and the study and understanding of reality and the nature of language and words. And one of the things that I think through so much is that so much is just missed in translation. And then you and your social scientists, trying to explain to them why all of these systems are so disparate, and they don't have common keys or master data or anything that you could really leverage so that you can expand out what you're doing. But I tend to call myself like the squishy human data scientist. I'm fascinated by how the human behavior is modified based on the metrics and the measurements, and I have several hypotheses that I'm still trying to test, where if we really start to expose some of the understanding of what's underneath data science, I'm hoping that will make it so much more accessible, because we need so many different types of human beings, because AI is going to affect every single one of us. It should be something that is built and democratized. I'm like, why can't it be like houseplants? You either, give it sunlight and water and let it grow, or it dies.
That's awesome, Beth. That's like, I can't wait to get into the details of this discussion. There's so much we can talk about. Daryl, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Well, thanks, Robin. And yeah, Beth, I love that analogy around the plants, and yeah, it's very cool. I remember growing up and in high school, math was my favorite subject. So at the time, data science wasn't really around. So I just thought I'd go to university and become a math teacher. And when I got to university, I actually met some consultants. We had some of our professors. I went to the University of Waterloo, and they were consultants. And I heard about this field of consulting, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. So when I graduated, I actually went on to a consulting career. I started at Deloitte and worked with large companies such as General Motors or Kraft Canada and Kraft USA, and working on data models there. And I found this really interesting. And I also worked with some public sector clients. I worked at the federal level, the municipal level, and the provincial level. And I love the municipal level. So then I can attest to working at the city. It's a very interesting level in terms of government. It's very, very the public can see it. So we've always, when you come to the city, you can actually see city services. And I think that's what really brought me to the city. I thought it was really interesting to actually see city services for front and center. So when I came to the city, I started in the IT department. So I started working in the IT department, in the project management office. So I kind of stepped away from data for a bit, and eventually started working for the CIO. And then working for strategic support for the CIO was very interesting, and actually finding the data points and actually how to run an IT organization. And the city has over 150 different lines of business. So from an IT point of view, most IT CIOs be like, I can't run this, 150 different lines of business. And what's so interesting is the data supporting it. And then in probably the last 5 years of my career, I've actually shifted back to the data side. And I joined a small central data analytics team in the city. And what was cool about this is when I joined the team early, they asked if I wanted to take on the open data role. And at the time, I didn't know anything about open data. And I'm like, okay, what does this all entail? And it's like, well, it's about releasing data to the public. And my first thoughts, I'm like, what are they going to do with it? And then I started meeting the civic tech groups, and it was just blowing me away in terms of what they were actually using the data for. And been working with Carleton and Ottawa U, and giving data to the students, actually real data, and it's really powerful. And I was popping in and out of the student projects today and looking at the posters, and it's so meaningful to actually give them actually real data. So it's been my little journey. Over to you, Robin.
Cool, thanks, Daryl. So I'll introduce myself, and then we'll get into some of the kind of panel discussion. So my name is Robin Grosset. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Mindbridge here in Ottawa. So my career, I actually started as a physicist. That's what I went to university to study. And during my physics undergraduate, I got distracted by computer science. And I ended up getting a kind of joint honors degree in both physics and computer science. That's when I graduated. And it's kind of interesting for me was that I started off expecting to be a physicist, and I ended up thinking that maybe I wanted to be a computer scientist at the end. And certainly that kind of the combination of these kind of numerate disciplines has been pretty useful in my career. But I didn't. The job that I got out of university was actually just software engineer. I went to London and I joined a company that was working on something called business intelligence, which everybody thought sounded really cool. So I was in this kind of business intelligence market that became the business analytics market. I founded a company in London to do real-time business intelligence, and was acquired by a Cognos company called Cognos. Sorry, a Canadian company called Cognos that was based here in Ottawa. That resulted in me relocating. I was expecting to come to Ottawa for just 2 years. That was what the contract said. And that was 15 years ago. So I still haven't managed to find a reason to leave Ottawa. Shortly after being acquired by Cognos, I was acquired again by IBM. That was a really interesting journey of going from small startup to big corporation to enormous corporation. I stayed in IBM for close to 9 years, and I worked in the analytics division. I became a part of the Watson Group, and I was the chief architect for something called Watson Analytics back in 2016. And I like to say that I left a perfectly good job at IBM, because it was a perfectly good job at IBM, to join Mindbridge. At the time when Mindbridge was just a little kind of seedling company, no real product or customers to speak of. And we've been on this journey at Mindbridge in the last, 6 years now, building our AI platform, which analyzes financial transactions and finds irregularities. It's basically what we do is financial risk scoring. That's kind of my journey. I will say that I was once a researcher. I need to add something to that, because I was once a research assistant, and it was for a very short period of time during my undergraduate. And I worked in Tanzania for 3 months doing marine surveys. And I was there to be the numerate guy who crunched the numbers using MATLAB. But I got to do lots of scuba diving at the same time. So it was quite good fun. And really, that was probably the first role where you would say I was a data scientist, but we weren't called data scientists back then. We were either scientists or engineers, or people who crunch numbers, sometimes with Excel and sometimes with software, right? So I think the world has changed quite a lot since then, and we now have actual data science as a role. And I'm really excited for anybody joining the data science profession these days, just because there's such a lot of structure that didn't exist back when I graduated all those years ago. So I'm going to start the kind of panel discussion with some questions, but just before I do that, I want to encourage the folks in the audience, if you want to ask a question to a panel member, if you want, or all of us, please feel to put it. There's a Q&A section, and we will be monitoring those. Daryl and I will be monitoring those through the session. So if you want to ask a question, please do, and we'll try to get to them. So again, we got to know our panel members pretty well. I got to learn some things I didn't know about people. So I want to ask, our kind of first question is, what was your favorite class in university? This is a bit about getting to know you, but also, how do you think that prepared you for a career in data science? And given our diverse backgrounds, I don't think any of our backgrounds are the same. In fact, I think this is going to be a really interesting set of responses. So I'm going to pose that question. What was your favorite class and how did that prepare you? I'm going to ask that to Beth.
So my favorite class in university was undergrad, and it was Buddhism Transformed, and it was about the Theravada Buddhist and the nuns and the nunnery in so there's the Mahayana and the Theravada and the lesser vehicle, the nuns and some of the things that have happened in that area, and understanding the combination of religious sects and large scale cultural movements, and I was hooked to really understand, how Siddhartha Gautama Buddha, he said, well, my religion's only going to last half as long because I had to let my aunt into the nunnery, which not a lot of people know. And I'm like, interesting. But it was fascinating. And it was such a dense aspect from, somebody like me who was raised in more on the Western kind of hemisphere culture. And to be able to kind of get insight into, Buddhism, and I would not even know where to begin, because I think that most of what we know, and a lot of what we are learning is we're having to unlearn quite a bit, and I think that is due to us comprehending that the data that was transformed to information, that was transformed to knowledge and wisdom. Well, that was all biased by the people who were, everybody always says history is written by the victors. But in actuality, you have archaeologists pulling things out of the ground and looking for correlations and saying, okay, well, how did this get here? And they're rewriting some of the history. So a lot of what we know to be true is likely not. And I think that, these are the big questions that I now seek out and try to seek out answers for. And something like, how do I know what I know? How do I know that it's true? How do I know that it's right? How do I seek, triangulation and correlation? Where are my sources? Who paid for the study? All of these questions from a class that just blew open my mind about, understanding something that I had no real knowledge in. And I think that one of the things that I would tell students is go for what you love, go for what you're interested in. And it's impossible to be curious about something you don't know. So throw yourself into the deep end and, see if you can take a class that would just truly kind of open up your brains to a whole different area of thought.
Cool. It's a really kind of interesting observation that we, how we rely on information and evidence is, it goes across almost all parts of human endeavor, right? So, and it's why understanding information or data becomes critical, right? I guess you could argue it's just a part of general kind of scientific theory, but it actually impacts many other disciplines as well, right? So that's a great observation. So over to you, Vin. Why don't you share what was your favorite class, and how did that help you prepare for a career in data science?
What I learned is Beth remembers a lot about university, in which I don't recall much. But I remember it's not particularly a class subject, but how a professor presented the material that I still actually hold very dear, and how to be a knowledge translator when you work in an organization. And often, it was actually an advanced organic chemistry class. So in organic chemistry, you're talking about models, how they collide, how things adhere, and you're looking at carbon angles and things like that. And I remember in previous classes, you're memorizing a lot of those models. And for those in science, you would kind of stick out your hand as a carbon model to understand kind of the formulations of it. And I remember Dr. Mezel often said during his evaluations, you have to explain me the theory and the practical applications like I'm a man at the bus stop. And so that for me, I still hold dear when I'm working in an organization that's so cross-cutting with many different disciplines. I work in social services where most of my stakeholders and essentially all my directors and decision makers all come from that world. So it's looking at aligning many of our data strategy elements when it comes to looking at data to inform social inequities, or looking at freeing up time and space of administrative barriers to which our caseworkers could spend more time with our clients that are in need. All those things are metrics and key messages that are really aligned on how data, and as Beth said it very well, is a footprint of human behavior. So it starts with that, especially in an organization where we don't have those traditional STEM disciplines represented very well. It's all about being able to translate a lot of data principles and data fundamentals, not really using a master client database, which I'm seeking for, and looking at foreign keys and primary keys and things like that. But you still have to have that skill set in which you interface with colleagues in IT, for example. You're working with your data engineers, you're working with your ETL professionals. But it's really bridging those multiple worlds in that way, and being able to explain it from your audience point of view. And that's really what I take from an organic 2 class, which it took me a really long time to actually understand how to apply that, and what Dr. Mezel was talking about during that class. So yeah, that's me. Over to you, Robin.
That's a cool answer. I'll answer next, so I don't want to be last all the time. It's interesting. I thought about this question a lot because we were in preparation for this kind of session, and I was trying to pick a class and I couldn't do it, right? Like, which is the one class that you like the most? And in my degree was really odd because I was doing this joint honors thing, and it turned out that I was the only person studying both physics and computer science in the year that I was doing it, right? So it was there was nobody who was in all of the classes that I was in, right? And I would go from one class, which was all about like things like sorting algorithms and how to write efficient code, right? And then my next class would be something to do with semiconductor theory at the fundamental physics level, right? So you're talking about doping materials and how that works. And you could say that those are related, but I found this kind of variety of mixing of how to think about the physical world, right? And then linking it to machines and writing code and math, right? I found that combination was the thing that I enjoyed. And I didn't go through university thinking I'm going to be a data scientist, but at the end of it, I was pretty well equipped to do that. I think it was this combination of different things. And I will say that when I went to university in the UK, and when you decide on your undergraduate, you're pretty much locked in. You're just studying that. There's not a lot of variety in the classes, right? So I don't think that's not true in every institution. I know that it's not true at Carleton or in a lot of the programs these days. But it felt like you were locking into a single discipline, right? When you went to university, you made this choice. And that's why I kind of chose this joint honors. It was more work, but I like the variety. And I think that's also a little bit about why I think that prepared me for data science more than anything else, was just this combination of different skills. And the other thing is that you often get, in kind of the data science world, the problems that I get asked to look at are, even at MindBridge, like you think, oh, we just do financial risk discovery, right? There's only one or two problems there, right? There's a whole vast of different scenarios, and people are involved. To Beth's point, the data, it's human. This is the data exhaust from human activity, right? It's probably the most interesting thing that you can analyze. And there's all of these kind of circumstances that go around, understanding understanding the data and figuring out who generated and why, what was their motivation, right? It's kind of super interesting. And particularly if you think about fraud, there's all these motivating factors you learn about fraud, which is kind of what MindBridge works at. So I'd say it's this kind of combination of different things. And it's not one thing. It's not one class. I couldn't pick one. So I've ruined the question for everybody now. So I'm going to pass it over to Navina for, what was your favorite class?
I didn't have your problem. I kind of instantly knew what my favorite class was. But I want to circle back because we are talking to a group of students to two things here. And I want to give a high five to both Beth and Vin and Robin and pick a common thread here to something that is kind of my answer to later questions in this panel. We've already talked about information and using facts and data to answer and understand the systems we are living in. To me, that's the data science. That's what we are doing. But then communicating what we've learned is the hardest thing, the biggest challenge of actually aligning others on board with what we've learned. Two things. Yeah, for me, it was abstract algebra, the most abstract thing in math, which starts with some axioms, so assumptions. And then you learn from these assumptions what you can build, and then you add a few more assumptions, and your Lego box is now a little bit bigger, so you can build a bit more, and you add a few more assumptions. Now your Lego box is full. From there on, you build a whole system of a lot of theory that one can study forever, and I was so mind blown. You start with a few things, assumptions, and then you build a whole new thing from it. I remember that feeling of realizing that we are actually building something. Like you're starting, it's like a Lego set. And it's a system. And it's understanding how this system, based on few assumptions, is actually interacting with each other. We've built it from ground up. We haven't built the world from ground up, but we live in a similar system. There are few assumptions that we are all assuming to be true. And then we've built the society, the financial systems, the electronic systems, whatever you want from them. And they're all interacting with each other, most of the time not breaking the basic assumptions that we assume are true. And that's my world today. I am similar to you, Robin, in financial systems, and they are all interrelated, and they influence each other, and understanding them is what I do day in and day out.
Awesome. Daryl, do you have anything to add? What was your favorite class?
I kind of relate to Navina. Once I decided I was going to be a math teacher, I switched into math business. And at Waterloo, they have a partnership with the University of Laurier. So I did all my business classes down there, and I really gravitated to marketing. And I was kind of relating to what Navina was saying around communication. You could build the most beautiful data model, and it's awesome. The model's actually telling you so much, but if you can't communicate it, the model is nothing. So I do find, I do look back on that marketing course and how to sell it. And you got to sell it to your colleagues. You got to sell it to your management. You got to sell it to leadership for them to build that trust in the model. And then for them to use that trust in the model, actually make decisions. So I really love marketing. And I actually think for the students a lot, I remember in my marketing class, we talked about your own personal brand and your own marketing of yourself and your skill set. And when you're early in your career, it's how do you position yourself and how do you actually market yourself into the jobs you want to get?
So I'd like to bring in, there was a question, I've been looking at the Q&A, and there's a kind of question which I think is kind of a little bit related to what you were just talking about, Daryl, and also Navina, some of the things you were saying. So the question comes from Paul O'Leary. What are the important soft skills that you find you need to be an effective data science? I think communication, selling, right? Selling is an odd thing. Most technical people don't think about selling. What's your view? What are the soft skills that are important, Daryl, other than selling?
I think listening. So it goes back, we were talking earlier about when you're building these data models. I think listening is so critical to really, Ben was talking some of the social services areas and actually understanding the needs of the client. You can't really build a good data model if you're not listening and really understanding the problem that they're trying to tackle themselves and what are some of the barriers they're working through.
Yeah, I think the other piece I would say is that as people develop in their career, as you go from a graduate and maybe in a junior data science role, and you go into a leadership role, I think there are different skills that come to bear. I wonder, Navina, you've gone through this journey yourself. You've gone from being, someone who's analyzing the models yourself to mentoring to now being a manager of a data science team at Shopify. What do you, in that path, what do you think are the kind of soft skills that are necessary to be a data science lead?
Oh, leadership is a whole other beast on its own. And I don't think we're trained for it. Like, I have technical background. Leadership is something that kind of people assume you'll pick up on your own, but it's almost like parenting, people become parents, but nobody taught them of being a parent. Similar. So soft skills, empathy, a lot of empathy, especially being a leader through COVID time, understanding where people are, what their current situations are, understanding not just people you work with, also people who you are working for. Like, Shopify is in e-commerce, we are building a platform for merchants. How does it look like to be a merchant through COVID? What is it, the problem we are solving? So empathy, communication, definitely, because people, especially in stressful situations, it's very hard to get to them. So understanding where they're coming from, how to talk to them, how to approach them, how to bring them back to, this is the goal. We are not enemies. We are trying to solve the same problem. But then it's also how you stretch people. So unless I put people in uncomfortable situations where they may not know what they're doing, they'll never grow. And as a lead, without pushing people to that place, I would never actually allow them to realize their potential. Can anybody else think of anything else? There are probably 1,000 more.
I'm taking notes, Navina. I'm definitely taking notes because I'm actually transitioning to that right now, of being an active manager of my group. I can definitely attest to that. But back to your question, especially early on, I think most data science work starts with data discovery, and I want to change that last discovery word to dig, like dig deep, and go beyond just what that column kind of shows, and do those interviews with your stakeholders and have, very much like the scientific method, have it fairly systematic, especially if it's one of the key features that you're training on.
When we're using the data detective for this, it kind of works well because it's sassy.
Yes, I like that.
Everybody wants to be a detective, but it's hard work.
For sure, and it's beyond just your initial stakeholder. Sometimes, often you have to then build a network that steams. And I really love that you brought the fact from the client's point of view. We deal with the most vulnerable in our society. So interacting with the city to provide income statements, to provide rental slips, utility bills, it's not really a pleasant, activity. Are there things within that process that are biasing the data that you actually see? So sitting down and actually, jumping in and observing some of those interactions takes time. We actually have a graduate from this program that started with us just before COVID hit. And it's only now, almost 3 years later, that he actually feels comfortable looking at developing some machine learning models on emergency shelter data. It's taken him that long to really understand the interplay between all the shelter providers, what's important to the business, and really how does churn look like? How do we deal with clients that have, like sounding names? Why is there overlapping stays? All those things. There's a business rationale for it, and accounting for it does take a lot of time. So be patient with yourself, but don't be afraid to dig deep.
I always say there's 3 steps to any mathematical problem, and this is Conrad Wolfram, so totally ripped it off from him. But you start in the real world and you have a problem, or you ask yourself a question. You go from the real world to the mathematical world and you perform a calculation, run a model, run a filter, do a data thing. You go from the mathematical world back to the real world and see if you've answered that question. My bit is all data scientists suck at 1 and 3. All of them. So you have to really augment yourself with as many people as possible. And, as I intended that, it's to showcase that, one of the single most important things that you can have is domain expertise. And to Vin's point, and, Navina, your ability to functionally decompose a problem into its simplest parts so that you can truly understand it requires domain expertise. And my prediction is that, data scientists in the future will be, marketers who use data science techniques, advertisers who use data science techniques, scientists who use data science techniques. And, that is it. It's going to be diffused back to the domain experts. And I think that while we are in this period, our job is to prepare data to be interrogated by domain experts. And, the ability to make that as inclusive as possible, because we need the widest set of neocortexes in order to be able to solve some of these problems. And because AI is going to affect every single human being, it is like I'm like screaming from the mountaintop all the time that if you want to get into data science, go learn a domain, go learn, something that needs to be done. If there's not anything like that in front of you, go be a customer service desk agent. That's where all the problems are. That's where all the troubleshooting is. That's where all the client interaction is. And be curious. Then I love your digging. It relates to my archaeology so much. But I mean, like, dig. Why? We always call the 5 whys. Keep asking why. Keep asking, how do you know what you know? Keep asking the question, because so many people forget that single step. And they jump right into the data and they make conclusions without truly understanding how that data got there in the first place.
Yeah, I really like the 5 whys. It's a great to keep thinking about a problem until you've really got to the nub of it. I think Vin's example also of that can take time. I remember I used to have a slide. I think I still have it somewhere, where I'd have data scientists are unicorns, right? These are super rare individuals, and it's the combination of skills. It's the scientific, scientific theory, statistics, math, right? Coding skills, right? Being able to construct models in code, right? And then it's the kind of domain expertise as well. And that probably all of us started without all of those, right? I'm going to say we all started without all of those. And I think there's quite a few questions I've noticed in the chat here about how people acquire skills they don't have, right? If I'm here and I need to get there, does anybody have any advice for folks who are thinking, they maybe have 1 or 2 of those skills, right? And they're looking to acquire another, anyone with any advice for students with that?
Find a buddy. Data science is a team sport. I was a programmer at one point or another in life, but now these kids with the interpretive languages and no compiler, I'm like, you guys go. It's so much faster. So augment. I'm kind of outsource what you're bad at, what you don't like to do, and find another human being or another person that you guys can put your heads together, because the ability to collaborate and ask for help and recognize that there's no such thing as a new idea, it's all a remix. What you can do with confluence and collaboration is far, far more critical than what you can do on your own in trying to acquire all these skills. Instead, go in and figure out what you like, what you are passionate at, what you are good at, and what will drive an economic engine. If you don't have all of the skills, go find a buddy that does.
None of us know everything, so continuous learner is a fact of life. The question is where you are in life and what's your biggest objective today to learn. For somebody getting into data science career, soft skills are secondary, technical skills are what you're going to be tested on. So I'm so happy, Win, that you mentioned real data. No, Daryl mentioned real data given to students. That's what you need to know. Use some real data to produce some real insights. Add business domain knowledge on it, interpret what that data means, make somebody believe into your analysis and the results of it. That's where I would start.
Yeah, just to add on that, I love Beth's example of a customer service agent. So many of you likely have a part-time job. So I think there's two prongs to my comment here. One is having access to open data. There's a lot of data sets already there, but one of the, I say, limitations of open data is typically open data is pretty clean, and administrative data is where I think a lot of recruiters are looking whether you're able to attach that to a project. So if you have a part-time job, even as a customer relation agent, if you can get your hands on some data that's practical to where you have a little bit of business domain and attach a data science project to that and be able to play it back to your existing management structure, that kind of would count as an underlying project that you've been able to actually apply in the real world. Going back to Beth's 1 and 3 example, without that opportunity, open data, I think, would be a fine substitute for sure. But I think one of the key things that I'd be looking for as a manager is having a project that displays the realities of administrative data. And if the administrative data is not accessible, create your own. We have all the tools to do that now. It could be just on your shift and what you see, but it kind of gives that slice and that kind of one project that allows for that next step that will really just explode once you get into that entry level position. You continue to add on and later on experience.
Yeah, I think it's so important to learn by doing, right? To actually go and do something real, because you can pick up some theoretical problem, and you're not the first to solve it either, and you don't get to the real messy part of the digging, right? Real world is messy, it just is. So I think doing something real is really, I think that's an awesome kind of, it's an awesome way to learn, but it provides this kind of tangible experience and outcomes, which this actually leads to one of the questions that that was on our docket for today, which was when hiring data science positions, right? So what are the skill sets and traits that you would look for, like particularly if you're looking to hire someone someone who's more junior? What are the, Navina, you made this point that the technical skills are super important more than the soft skills. I was wondering if you could give us a kind of overview. What are the things that you look for in a data science that you're hiring?
So when hiring at Shopify, first, let me start like this. There is no one definition of data scientist. Data scientist, the same title, 2 different companies will be 2 different jobs. So I'll tell you about Shopify. We say we are looking for data science generalists. Technical skills would be software engineering. We've talked a lot about data in architecture, how we collect it, how we store it, which requires software skills, so real software development. That's one. Then business acumen. Can you translate a business problem into numbers? Here is where communication comes in as well. And technical expertise. Have you done this before? How did you learn things that you needed to learn on the way? How did you choose which technology to use? Because there is an overwhelming amount of different ways to do things. So it's more about reasoning. Do you have acumen for learning? How do you make your decisions? This is something that students do day in and day out in every single course. So that's what we're looking for.
Beth, do you have a view on this from IBM's perspective?
So IBM depends what division you're in, and even people in that division, not everybody understands the business they're in. So there's lots and lots of different things. But I'm actually the opposite. So I'm will over skill every single day of the week. And part of what I have noticed is because of the frequency of the changes of the technology, somebody who can, build their thing, destroy it, rip it apart, take it apart, build it again, rip it apart, take it apart, build it again. And, I always tell the people, and Robin, this is like, I'm like, you have a computer. What is it that you think you can't do? Put your hands on the keyboard and do it. And it sounds so simple, but there are so many people who put up 1,000 barriers for not being curious about something. And, I think, Vin, you pointed out, make your own data. Some of the very first data scientists were the first astronomers. If you want to predict where the sun's going to come up, you need to keep very good records. So go out and sit and look at where the sun comes up and keep a record of it, and then see if you can predict it. And that is the fundamentals of good, garbage in, garbage out, but understanding your own bias. What if you're tired that day and you don't mark it correctly? Or what if, you overslept and you didn't get it at the right time? We think in terms of data that we have on hand, and so many data scientists are not creative enough to understand that the data that they're looking at that is often on hand is not the data that they need to solve the problem. And I'm always like, who are the most studied human beings by psychiatrists? Does anyone know? Psychology students, because they're on hand. And this is the aspects of humanity that we are often missing: the forest through the trees, or the trees for the forest. So figure out who you can, figure out what causes you angst, and go see if you can find a data way to solve that.
Great answer. So I'm gonna take a question that's from the Q&A as well, from the audience. And I really like this question. I probably should end with some sort of wrapping up question, but this one is too cool a question. It's when there were really hard times for you and you didn't see the light at the end of the tunnel, what brought you back on track, right? I have experience of this as a data scientist and solving data problems. So survival strategies, what's your personal experience? Anybody want to take that? Nope.
I will second what Beth said earlier, talking to somebody else. Getting out of your single point of view, even trying to explain to another person what you're struggling with, puts you in a different position. And then they also bring their own point of view and so on. I think for one of the problem, I was building a predictive model for something, and I think the most impactful feature, a colleague of mine told me about it while he was waiting for food in line. We were just chatting, and they were like, "Have you thought of this?" I was like, "No, I didn't." And that turned out to be the most predictive thing.
Wow.
Curiosity and rituals. And curiosity is really hard when you're down, and it's really hard to go, why does this not work? So, but if you have some rituals, journaling, meditation, going out for a run, going out for a jog, sweating, whatever it is, some days those rituals carry you. So if you can build up those things that you're doing on a daily basis, make your bed, see the sky before a screen. That's one of my favorite latest ones. And I think that it allows you to have that certainty so that you can deal with all of the uncertainty and when things don't work. And there are many days that my rituals have carried me. And when I go back and read those journal entries, they're crap, but it doesn't matter because it's done. So it's those things in the hardest times, go to the constancy that you create. And, you can then analyze data about it if you're a data geek.
Yeah, I mean,
I love those answers.
You go.
I often do this with Daryl. We're part of the same organization. So it starts with called Daryl. We'll talk about the Raptors, how well they're doing, how crap they're doing, and then jump into something that I'm hitting a wall against, and just having, the ability to just kind of share it from a different point of view. And sometimes he's just nodding away. He probably didn't even say anything. And I'm just like, oh, I think I got something out of it. So find your Daryl and find multiple Daryls from different aspects. I love those responses. I love to really surround myself from people from every generation, to be very explicit, and because they see it from different points of view, and you're also you're forced to actually explain it from different points of view, different vantage points, and it really gives you that 360 view of that particular problem. So sorry, I cut you off there, Robin.
No, it was great. I mean, I think there's I think all these answers are great, and I'm probably gonna. I love to see this guy before a screen. I don't do that enough at the moment. I mean, I think you're gonna hit hard problems. It's like, just accept the fact that that's going to happen, and that's like, and I kind of like the idea of kind of just being relentlessly optimistic, right? And asking why 5 times is not what a normal person does, right? So you've got to get used to that. I mean, that kind of personifies relentless inquiry, right? You got to get up every day and think there's something that you don't know, right? And figure out how you learn it. And that's what that's why I enjoy my job, right? It's because every day is different, and you never know what you're gonna learn next. So we're at the end of our time. I want to thank all of the panelists for attending today. It's been a really fun session. With that, thank you for attending Data Day 8.0, and thanks for all the attendees for showing up. It's been a fun session, and thanks again. So can the moderator please close the session now? Thank you. Thanks very much, everyone.